not phased by it. So.
Greetings, Kevin Clark here with the International Society of Service Innovation Professionals, or ISSIP. I'm an ambassador from the People-Centered Internet, and I'm delighted to be spending some time with Tinsley Gallion. And Tinsley, I understand that you
Yes.
have just won an award, an ISSIP award, right? Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's an honor. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Um, Tell me a little bit about yourself before we start talking about the award. Your background, your bio, things you want to share with people.
Yeah, I have kind of unusual background. I started off my kind of academic career in both the sciences, computer science, electrical engineering, as well as the visual arts and design. And I eventually landed and did my PhD at the MIT Media Lab in the early 90s, which was a kind of wild time to be at that lab. And
I was there as represented from IBM on the steering committee for Nicholas
uh-huh.
Megapady's team. So,
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
very interesting period indeed.
Yes, yes, very much so. So I started my PhD work in 1990 and finished in 95, just as the internet was coming out. And so then worked in a number of entrepreneurial ventures over the years, almost always with in media and technology, and often with a kids focus. So
Yeah.
it took me to doing large scale installation work, for big museums, for science museums, for MoMA, for Millennium Dome in England, all around the world. And then also working in children's media for Disney and Discovery Channel and Viacom and, Warner Brothers. And ended up getting an Emmy nomination for some of that work. And then after being part of a number of different kind of startups and some that went bust and one that went public, ended up kind of readjusting my life and was found myself back at the Media Lab teaching some and helped start a nonprofit that was affiliated with MIT called the Dalai Lama Center for Ethics and Transformative Values, which gave me an opportunity to work with His Holiness for a couple of years. And during the course of my time back at the Media Lab, I became part of a group looking at researching whether kids could learn to read from mobile devices, tablets at that point in time. And they were doing a project in remote Ethiopia to see if it was possible. And much to our surprise, kids that were in the middle of nowhere with no school to go to, with no one in their village literate, that were given tablets to play with for a year with curated content, were roughly at the same level they would have been if they were at a well-resourced US kindergarten after a year. And that kind of blew us away and eventually evolved into spinning out Curious Learning as a global nonprofit that's focused on just that.
Wow, that's cool. Were you working at all with Walter Bender? Right.
I did know Walter. Walter and I were both there at the
I
lab at the
liked
same
his
time.
work. I guess they eventually moved him into that area called the Cube. That was really
Yeah.
interesting. Uh, Interesting space. And Ted Selker was right across the hallway. All right, doing
Mm-hmm.
work
Yeah.
in uh, smart environment kind of stuff. So
Yep.
yeah, so I'm
Yep. I crossed paths with Ted a couple times while I was there.
yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
it's a it's because I think that Walter, after what you're describing, got involved with the one laptop per child. All right.
Yeah, with OLPC. That's correct.
Yeah. And so
Correct. Yeah.
he had the software piece, and then there was a hardware thing, and
Mm-hmm.
it was interesting. All right. I thought that what they would
Yeah.
develop in software was really impressive. And
It,
sounds
it
like what
was.
you're done is really impressive too.
Well, and as a matter of fact, that first research project in Ethiopia was done in collaboration with OLPC. They had contacts in
It
Ethiopia,
sounds like it.
and
Hmm.
and they um, they were in the process of starting to kind of shut down at that time. But it was with the help of some of the folks there that we were able to do that initial
Hmm.
research on the ground there.
Fantastic. That's
Yeah.
great. So tell me about the award that you received. What did you receive it for?
Well, I think it's for the work that Curious Learning is
Yeah.
doing, which is, in a nutshell, the concept is that, can we use the mobile devices to help kids learn to read? And, the gist of the idea is that you have, a growing infrastructure that's being paved by companies all over the world,
Mhm.
to get low-end smartphones in the hands of as many people as possible and get them connected. And yet at the same time, we have a world where there's an enormous number of illiterate people, like somewhere in the neighborhood of like 660 million completely illiterate adults. And we're about ready to hit a population explosion in Africa in particular. And over the next 25 years, there will be about 1.25 billion people added to the African continent. And so 1 in 4 people by 2050 will be
Mhm.
African. And yet, across sub-Saharan Africa, um, only 10% of the population reads at grade level by grade 4. So there's a kind of failure of basic educational opportunity on the continent, and there's no way the infrastructure is going to be capable of improving itself, more or less doubling its capacity in the next 25 years. So we've kind of turned our attention towards, can we fill that gap at least partially with getting resources, free open source apps to through parents to parents low-end smartphones for kids to use to supplement and, yeah, and help them through their learning to read journey.
Yeah. I mean, it's been amazing that, a lot of Africa has simply bypassed bricks and mortar and gone directly to
Absolutely.
m-commerce, right? On the phone,
Absolutely.
banking, buying things, trading, and education just seems like a natural, right? In terms of, going
I
into that space.
We certainly think so. Um, Literacy is a tough one. It's probably the hardest part of education. When we started a decade ago, there was already a lot of movement in internet-based education. Khan Academy was around and others
Mhm.
were around. They were doing great work, always. Lots of them have been. But when we started, we looked at it and we realized there was a hole, which was that all those systems were great and fantastic, but they required that you have basic literacy to be able to use them. And so what about those people who hadn't been able to get to that basic literacy? And that's the hole we've been trying to plug. And it's probably the hardest part of the educational chain
Mhm.
to do.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right.
So, you've given us something of the history. Where do you see this going? What is the impact so far, and what do you see happening next?
Yeah, so over the course of our lifetime, we've had about 6 million kids using our apps at one point or another. In 2024, we started testing our first kind of scaling up strategies,
Hmm.
and we reached 1 million in 2024. Okay, and we did that by direct to parent kind of awareness campaigns that were mostly done through social media, and we were able to, the cost of us acquiring a learner, as we call it, right, which is getting a learner to the point where they've downloaded the app and opened it, started to use it, was about 50 cents per learner,
Hmm.
right, which is pretty remarkable. So um, we feel like we've kind of, I'll give you an analogy to kind of give you
Okay.
a layout of what's going on here. If you think about an intervention, if you think about illiteracy as as something that we need to find a cure for, or this lack of opportunity to learn to read, and like if you had a drug for fighting TB or for AIDS, you would first have to develop a drug and the protocol for applying that. And then you would need to get it in the hands of the people that are there, and then you'd have to get them to exercise long-term compliance with the process of using the drug to actually to get the health benefit. So if you think of those 3 steps, We have curated and found and localized apps to 50 plus languages and continue to grow that base of content with partners and with people. And we have a number of studies that show that when kids use those apps and have access to them, over time, deep learning happens. World Bank did an RCT, and we've done, World Vision did another study. There's a whole series of studies that we've done to do that. And we've figured out the next step, which is how do we get in the hands cheaply and quickly, which is through mobile devices and through awareness campaigns. Now, the next step that we're working on right now is how there's a certain percentage that just takes to it naturally and benefits from it and uses it to its completion and does great with it, but it's a relatively small percentage. So now how do we create more engagement with it long term, more compliance to the intervention?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the piece that we're we're really working on now. And there's a number of ways we're starting to think about that.
Well, that sounds like you're making a lot of good progress. Is there a good way for people to discover this? Is there a, website URL that they can go to?
So yeah, just going to curiouslearning.org is a great place to start. And you can, from there, you can also find the links to, or you can go to the Play Store, the Android Play Store, and search for Curious Learning, and our apps will pop up. So another way to, if you want to play directly with the apps, if you want to learn more about the organization, go to our website.
Well, that's great. So, how did you find out about this ISSIP award? Um,
I
we're a
found,
relatively young organization, so we're always curious how do people find out about us and our awards program?
right. So I found out about the organization from Jim. Jim,
Doesn't everyone?
I know. Jim's the nexus of it all, right?
Yeah.
And yes, so and I knew Jim back from his IBM days, and we had reconnected, and he told me about the organization, and I joined it. And then it was shortly after I kind of joined that I was became aware of the awards and was suggested that we be considered. So
Well, he made a good suggestion, didn't he? All right. Well, we're very happy that you are getting this recognition for the work that you've been doing. Um, what would you ask for? What would you say that you're missing, that you're not connected with, or that you need some assistance with to get up to the next level? What would you say that is right now, and how can the ISIP network help?
yeah, I think there are probably two pieces to that. One is this what I'll call the engagement issue, which is that how do we keep kids and families more engaged? And we're starting to explore that in a number of ways. There's uh, one is we're starting to bring AI into the mix. So we're putting together, some AI technology that can support parents in rural, low income countries, with how they can better support their kids to learn to read, right? So but that means not just engaging kind of chatbots with LLMs behind them that are trained up to do this and answer the questions, but it'll also mean over time being able to do that in lots of different languages and being able to do it in a way that's with parents that have low literacy skills themselves. You know,
Mhm.
so it'll probably be speech to text and text to speech. Um, you know, Tools in different languages because we work in 55 plus languages already. And so there's that piece of it. There's some technology in there. There's the general engagement. The other part of it is we're always trying to expand the types of games and activities that are there. So if there are organizations that have or are able to kind of create mini games and activities in these in different languages that can facilitate that process, we're always interested in that. Matter of fact, um, we're interested. We've been exploring the idea of running because we have such a large data infrastructure and we get back all this data from what people are using and what is actually moving the learning needle. We have thought about using kind of competitions to create new pieces of games and activities that then get measured as kids play them with how effective they are. And that may involve using, AI to do some of the coding of those apps,
Mhm.
right? And people who have an interest in this space but could use, what's now being referred to as vibe coding to create apps and to get them into that space and to accelerate the process of richer and deeper content that has deeper learning and more engagement. So those are spaces we're looking to explore. And then, of course, we have some really great funders who are wonderful at supporting our work and are committed to our organization. But we're going to need more than that if we're going to go to scale. And so we're starting a concerted effort to try to establish deeper and broader connections to to donors, to individuals and foundations. So if there are folks that know folks that would love to have a conversation about this and see, and if it's a right partnership with them, then we'd love to hear about that as well.
All right. Well, that's great. So the way I end these is there a question that I didn't ask you that you wish I had asked?
Oh, that's a good.
So ask your question and then answer it.
You caught me off guard. You should have warned me on this one. Uh, I don't know. Uh, I guess a little more context about the kind of the geographic nature of the problem and the scale of it. I might take a moment to speak to that. I spoke a number of times about sub-Saharan Africa, and that's definitely true. It's definitely a point. But there are a lot of places around the world where there's need beyond that too. Um, India has a continually growing population, and there's a whole nother level of issues there because of the number of languages in India, and there's a slightly different dynamic in how to learn to read in Indian languages than there are in ones that use the Roman alphabet. So it's another space that we're exploring, and also the other place that our interventions have been quite successful that we want to continue to tap into is in areas of crisis. Um,
Mhm.
so, for example, in the first 100 days of the war in Ukraine, we were able to promote it and get 100,000 kids using the apps while their schools were questionably open, and they've continued to be a strong user of it throughout their war. Um, Afghanistan happens to be a place where our apps are being used quite extensively and well. And it happens, there's still areas of conflict and in refugee populations where there is at least temporarily little to no alternative. Our approach tends to be very successful as well. So that's another piece of the kind of broader geographic and social landscape where our stuff's applicable.
Well, it was an absolute delight to talk to you about this, unpack this. And again, congratulations on winning this award. Well deserved. And we're looking forward to hearing more as you progress and just get more and more adoption of your learning platform.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tinsley, all the best. We'll talk again soon.
Bye.